Hi, this is Jim Cunningham, and I have Christina, Lindsey, Orta from Ascent Wealth Management here with me today talking about passive income streams, and this is thinking beyond real estate. So a lot of our clients, and maybe you, passive income, great idea. A lot of people have real estate. I'm a real estate investor myself. Sometimes we look for other ways of passive income other than real estate, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So Christina, with that, I will let you take it away.
Thanks, Jim. Can you still hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, great. Thanks for the introduction. And yes, we want to talk about retirement income. And oftentimes, as people enter retirement, there's a false perception that you have to have real estate or something that's just going to deposit money and mailbox money to you every single month that can only come from real estate, when there's all kinds of sources of income. And really, as you're entering retirement or preparing for retirement, the bottom line is you're going from accumulation of wealth to distribution of wealth. And how do you distribute that wealth? And sometimes there's an offset that exists in a lot of clients' portfolios as they're preparing for retirement. They might be real estate rich, cash poor. So we want to look at all of the different types of passive income strategies and where different income can come from as you go into distribution of wealth.
Yeah, Christina, you're hitting something that I think is really important for people. I kind of see this with a lot of clients, 2 phases and sometimes 3. So there's this accumulation phase, meaning you're working hard, you're kind of like surviving, right? And you're getting your kids through school, you're maybe paying down debt, putting money into savings, putting money into a retirement account, and then you stop working, then you stop getting that wage or that income, and now you have to live off what you've earned. For some people, there's a middle period where they stop working, and maybe they've got some deferred comp or some other method. Maybe people who retire at 60 but don't quite yet start withdrawing from retirement accounts or hit Social Security. So this is really timely, I think, for a lot of people. So I'm Jim Cunningham. I'm a partner at Cunningham Legal. I've got more than 25 years experience, and we'll just leave it at 25. We have offices throughout California. I'm a certified specialist in estate planning, trust, and probate law. I'm a real estate broker, securities, and insurance licensed. Also a pilot, single engine land. These are the lawyers now. We have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13 lawyers now. We have Christina started this week in our Pasadena office. We're very excited for her to start. So Christina, welcome. And we're here really laser focused on the creation and preservation of multi-generational wealth. So we're an estate planning law firm. We handle a lot of real estate transactions, typically for the mass affluent people. And then here's the CFP only team, certified financial planner only team at Ascent Wealth Management. And Christina and her partners are here, Alyssa, Shannon, and John. And Christina, there aren't many female CFPs out there, are there? Like, what's the percentage?
I think it's about 15 to 17% of the industry.
And so tell me a little bit, before we jump into this, why should I care if somebody's a certified financial planner? What's the difference between someone who's a certified financial planner and maybe somebody working at one of these big wirehouses? Stock jockey is what you often hear about. What's the difference?
The main difference is we're fiduciaries before the word fiduciary really became a key word in the industry. And so we're held to a higher fiduciary standard. We have education requirements, college requirements, continuing education requirements, continued ethics requirements, and are accountable to the board. So our records are checked every year. If we've had a bankruptcy, a DUI, anything, we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard, and we do more comprehensive planning. So we're not looking at just an investment portfolio and how performance looks. We're looking at a more holistic view of your plan, how things integrate when we're looking at taxes, insurance needs, investment portfolio, your retirement income distribution plan. We're looking at estate taxes. We're looking at all of those factors and how they integrate, and looking at the actual trust documents, making sure that the estate plan is sound and mirrors what the financial plan is doing.
Yeah, the way I like to think about it is a certified financial planner. The C for certified financial planner is very client focused. So you are focused on the well-being of your client. And there is nothing wrong with the big wirehouse, the people that, these institutions that float tax-free bonds for states. I think those institutions primarily are focused on the health of our capital markets. So the United States is a great place to live. It's a great country. And we have fantastic capital markets, very transparent. They're very important in terms of keeping that system going. I think the disconnect sometimes is when it comes to the client. When somebody says, gee, I'm 70 and I'm retiring, what do I do, right? It's really hard. And I think I really like to see that the certified financial planner really is client focused. So talk about your disclosure.
We are securities licensed, so we have both a registered investment advisory firm and a securities brokerage firm. So we do things both sometimes on a commission basis for clients, and sometimes we're doing things on a fee-only basis or a fee-based basis. So it really just depends on what is best for the client, but we are fiduciaries. We are independent, so we are not beholden to a big wirehouse as an employee. We truly are acting in the best interest of our clients at all times and charging the fees that are most appropriate for them in their particular situation.
We have a disclaimer somewhere here. I don't know where it is, but our disclaimer is I'm a lawyer and I'm talking and words are coming out of my mouth. This is not legal advice. This is information only. So you've heard this. If you've seen these videos, you've heard that 100 times. Go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube page. We do these videos about once a week, and typically they're released on a Thursday at about 6 p.m. Pacific time, and then click the bell and then you'll be alerted when those hit. So our offices are located in Northern and Southern California, and we do help people in other states. We do have relationships with other lawyers in other states. So if you're not in California and need some help, we can certainly connect you with the right person. And we're Bay Area and Capital Region, which is the Sacramento area, as well as Southern California, Pasadena. These are locations. So Ascent, if you want to call, if these are numbers, if you want to call Ascent direct, 805-312-7200. And then we have our numbers here and our website. So let's talk about, now this is kind of, these are big words, alternative sources of yield. What are you talking about? Are you talking maybe different ways to make money on your money, right? Essentially like interest income, dividends, like you got a pot of money. What are the sources of this income other than, what are they? You got a whole bunch here. Why don't you walk us through them and unpack this for us?
That's correct, Jim. So, there's not just one way to get income in retirement. It could be from still maintaining a business ownership interest. It could be from real estate. It could be from directly owned real estate or passive real estate in a professionally managed form of real estate, which could be a Delaware statutory trust or a 1031 exchange. It could be interval funds. We're going to get into kind of the sources of each of these. It could be a traded or privately held REIT. It could be just municipal bonds, and corporate bonds are a great place right now with a higher interest rate market to be. We're in this 30-year, high as far as interest rates go. We're getting back into higher yields where you're getting a higher rate of interest for investing in these different sectors. So corporate bonds, municipal bonds, great place to be right now. Dividend paying stocks. Oftentimes we're kind of very focused on the what used to be the FANG stocks are now the Fabulous 8 stocks. And we've got, those big growth stocks that, play a role certainly in clients' portfolios, but they're typically not high dividend paying stocks. And dividend paying stocks, you can, in your accumulation of wealth stage, you might be reinvesting those dividends. And as you enter retirement, but that's typically one of the areas where we tell clients to clip that coupon first if we're looking for income, because you're paying the taxes on those dividends each and every year. If it's not in a retirement account, if it's in a taxable account, you're paying the dividends anyways. You might as well take that income stream.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. REIT stands for Real Estate Investment Trust. If you're looking at that and you go, correct. What is that acronym? So Real Estate Investment Trust, and we'll talk about that.
And a lot of these are very tax efficient areas to get income as well. Guaranteed annuities sometimes need to be playing a role in a client's portfolio too. Pensions became, guaranteed annuities have replaced kind of that old pension income stream because people don't have pensions as frequently anymore these days unless you're a government employee or, teacher or something along those lines. Pensions are few and far between. So guaranteed annuities kind of play that role for some clients in their portfolios if needed. And then you have brokered CDs, and we'll talk about that a little bit too. So getting into kind of the initial starting point, this is very base level. Again, we're comprehensive in our approach to our clients. We really want to understand the income need. And that's first and foremost is going through a basic budget and what are clients' base needs to meet their annual lifestyle expenses. And so first and foremost, you have your fixed expenses, then you have your discretionary expenses. And sometimes what we call is that income gap of what kind of income sources do you have coming in? Social Security, pension, guaranteed sources. Are your base fixed lifestyle needs met with any kind of a guarantee, or is it solely based on volatility of your stock portfolio? So we want to really understand what's your base needs, what's your discretionary need, and do we have any guarantees in the portfolio outside of pension and Social Security?
Christina, I'm looking at this and I have to assume that when people are retiring, they kind of look at how much they need in retirement. But how common is it for people to be totally in the dark and just like not even think about it? I mean, if you're getting ready to retire, you probably should sit down and figure out what your expenses are, right? Because you certainly don't want to outlive your money. I know that's a very common fear is for people to outlive their money, right? You spend everything and you're not dead and you're still alive. I think that is a big fear. Where can people, where can people go to budget in retirement? Are there any good, is that something you guys help with clients?
It is something we help with. We have some budgeting tools. We do have some software that we use that clients can link their credit cards and it will track what their annual spending has been. They can link their checking accounts. It'll track what that annual spending has been. So we really try to narrow down and drill down on, what's your mortgage expense? What's your car expense? What's your credit card expenses? What are your property taxes? What is your homeowner's insurance? And homeowner's insurance in California is one of those things that's gone up a lot with the fires. So are we adjusting for inflation? Are we counting on those increases over time and budgeting for that in the portfolio? So starting with this and then understanding what's the income gap. So if we take a look here at the income gap, in that particular example, only 25,000 of their income was guaranteed. The rest is going to have to come from other sources. So other sources being their investment portfolio, IRAs, 401ks, other types of assets that they own, and what's going to generate that income gap, because they have a huge income gap. $35,000 a year is their overall gap that they're going to have to draw from assets. And so if we don't have liquid assets and we only have hard assets of real estate, there becomes a real issue there of where are we going to pull from, if that real estate is underperforming or not, kicking out real estate income. So again, we want to make sure we've got diversified sources of income. So looking at the first kind of income source, we'll get into the detailed income sources, but what we do often as we're entering this distribution of wealth stage of retirement is take a bucketed approach. What's your short-term needs? So if we know, okay, we've got a $35,000 income gap that we have to pull from assets, we want to make sure we've got 3 years of very safe assets, CDs, cash-like investments to fill that income gap, and that money is not going to be subject to a stock market pullback of 20%. So we want to make sure that whatever you need for the next 3 years, we've got in a very, very safe bucket to fill your income need.
And what you're talking about is the difference, it's not all your income needs, but if your shortfall is $20,000 a year, it would be saving $60,000. So you want to keep, in this case, $60,000 positioned in cash, kind of at a minimum, right?
Cash alternatives, those kinds of things. So we certainly want to be looking at what is your short-term need for the next 1 to 3 years. And we don't want to be pulling money out of the stock market when it's down 20% to meet your basic needs for the next few years. So we've got our safe bucket, kind of our 1 to 3 year bucket. Then we've got our midterm bucket that might be our 3 to 7 year bucket. And then we've got our long-term bucket that could be, 7 years plus, that's going to get us through 30, 40 years of retirement. We're going to always be shifting these buckets and kind of pouring from one to the other. But you need to have a strategy. You need to have a quarterback. You need to have a fiduciary that's helping plan for these things. Because if we have that bucketed approach, it gives our clients a lot of peace of mind at night when they go, okay, this money's in my long-term bucket. Yes, the stock market was down. The NASDAQ was down 32% in 2022. If you owned those big growth stocks, you took a big hit. But those are the markets that, those are the types of stocks that will grow, 8 to 10% a year, typically long-term, if you have multiple years in the market. So if you have a long-term approach, 1 year down 20% is not going to impact your plan, because you've got your short-term needs, you've got your midterm needs. This is your long-term bucket. So we're not going to worry about what the stock market's doing for money that we're not touching for 7 to 10 years. So we do want to make sure we have a disciplined, bucketed approach. And this is just kind of that simple analogy of just making sure that we've got the right assets in the right sectors.
Christina, as you're talking about this, I'm reminded that a lot of you hear stuff in the ether, right? And a lot of advisors recommend that when you're working, you have 6 months of living expenses saved. That is different than your shortfall in retirement. It's a longer period of time, but maybe it's a less amount per month, right? So we're not talking about your total living expenses. We're talking about a longer term, but a little bit less money. So it's really important to pay attention to this. The reason why you want 3 years is, let's say you've got 3 years saved and then the market goes down 30%. A lot of people panic and they sell. They say, I don't want to lose any more. Because I see this, Christina, I'm sure you do. I see this on when there are these drawdowns, the clients call us, they say, Jim, I'm really worried. Should I sell? And it's like, I'm a lawyer, right? Talk to Christina. You're the financial advisor. But it's very important, because you might go through, there might be a period of maybe a year and a half or 2 years where the stock market's down. You don't want to be pulling money out of those stocks if they're priced 30% below where they should be, because there's a pullback in the market. So the idea is you don't want to eat your seed corn. You want to have that set aside. And that's why that period is a 3-year period, not the 6-month period that you may be familiar with.
That's correct. Yeah. So we do want to make sure clients have the appropriate amount of reserves, and it's going to be different for every client. And if you have any special expenses coming up, but you're right. 6 months of reserves is typically if you're working, and maybe 12 months of reserves if of what your income gap is, not necessarily your total income needs, but what your income gap is just keeping those reserves. But then sometimes clients have too much in cash, and especially in those years when cash wasn't returning much of anything at a bank. So we'll talk about that too in a minute. But sometimes people that have a really big income gap and they just need that peace of mind at night that they're going to have that mailbox money coming in. People that sometimes also might be underfunded for retirement. Looking at a single premium immediate annuity, that is putting a lump sum of your money into an annuity that's just going to guarantee you mailbox money for the rest of your life. And it typically will have a minimum period of time. It might guarantee over two lives, like husband and wife. It might have a 10-year period guarantee, so that if you passed away, there's still something that would go to your estate and your heirs. But this is a type of an annuity that fills that kind of pension-like requirement if you have that need for income. So this is not for everybody. This is just a type of vehicle that exists where you're transferring the risk of income needs to the insurance company, and they're going to guarantee that you're going to get paid every single month for the rest of your life.
And this is for some people and not for others. But I think this is for people who really worry, like they're looking at they're looking at the value of their stock portfolio every day, for example, and it just gives them so much anxiety. This is, hey, you're going to get this amount every month or whatever it is, every quarter, whatever the payout is, but you're going to get this every month for as long as you live. And that can be comforting for many people. Again, different strokes for different folks.
And it might be for a sliver right. of people's clients, or you had you're widowed and you lost a spouse that had a pension, and now right. you need to kind of replace that. So this is a specific type of need. But then if we look at other types of annuities that do exist, there are multiple different annuities out there, and annuities are not one size fits all. they are probably often oversold, oversold by non-fiduciary, non-CFP insurance brokers. So because, again, going back to that, we are a CFP, we're going to be using these only in appropriate circumstances that meet the client's needs. And it could be a variable annuity, it could be a fixed indexed annuity, it could be something that but offers an income guarantee. So the key thing is we're talking about income in this particular presentation, all these different annuities. We've done annuity presentations. Some variables have, upside, typically unlimited, but downside is unlimited as well. Fixed index has a limited downside, might have a cap on the upside. But all of these different types of annuities, we can add what's called an income guarantee component to it. And it may only cost 1% a year to add that component, where you've got that peace of mind, where you've got mailbox money coming in every single month for the rest of your life. And again, you're transferring that risk of market performance to the insurance company. So these types of things exist. It might be that you do that for that, your basic lifestyle needs, not the discretionary component of your budget. So income is something that we can add to different components of different annuities. Now we want to get into municipal bonds. Municipal bonds, it's funny. This is one of those things that we've done in our business. My father started at Edward Jones way back in 1996, and municipal bonds was what we started our business with. And it's kind of that building block, foundational component of income in a lot of our clients' portfolios, especially this is for non-retirement assets because it is tax advantaged. And when we're going to talk about the tax yields here in just a moment. But when you're in California and we've got clients that are well in that 35 to 53% tax bracket between state and federal, you're getting a really good rate of return on municipal bonds in this high interest rate market, but also even in lower interest rate markets, you're getting a really safe, typically, depending on what types of bonds you're buying. And there are junk municipal bonds. So I don't want to be overly using the wrong terminology here and saying safe, because there are some junk bonds that are not insured, that are high risk. But that's one of the things, also using the appropriate team to help you analyze the bonds. That's one thing our office does. We're looking for, A-rated or investment grade, typically insured. Oftentimes these are school districts, utility districts, water, sewer, airports, toll roads. Those are the types of bonds that we're looking at getting our clients into that have some sort of an insurance component typically. And in this particular case, we just said, okay, this client has $1 million. We're going to take $1 million. We're going to do 15 different types of bonds. Bonds pay different than stocks or mutual funds. So not a bond fund, but owning the actual individual bonds, they pay interest every 6 months. So January and July, February and August. So you're not going to have necessarily monthly income. And we can look at this for different clients, what their needs are, to maybe level out that income stream a little bit more, but you're going to have some months paying more than others depending on what types of bonds we're purchasing. And in this particular case, on $1 million of investment face value of bonds, this is going to generate $44,502 a year of tax-free income, federally tax-free, state tax-free. And if you're in a state outside of the state of California, it's important that we're mindful of if you typically don't, unless you're in a zero tax state, you typically do not want to own, if you live in Arizona, you don't want to own a California bond because Arizona is going to tax you on the California state income tax. So you want to typically own the state in which you're in, unless you're in a tax-free state. So that's something we have to take a look at. So I'm using California.
Christina, this is actually, you're hitting on two really important points that I think sometimes are completely overlooked by clients. Number one, putting a tax-free bond in your traditional IRA account only makes the tax-free interest taxable. That is a rookie mistake. And I mean, I don't see it that often. Do you see it, Christina? I mean, it's such a rookie mistake. We hardly even see it. The other one is paying attention to your state of residency. So we did a video, and a whole bunch of people are watching it now. I don't know why, but why retiring in California may be a good idea. So if you move from California to Oregon and you have a bunch of California tax-free bonds, that tax-free interest income now will be taxable as an Oregon resident. So, and they have pretty high income tax in Oregon. It's really not, it's kind of a flat rate. So you really
Whereas
do
if you
need to
go
pay
from
attention.
California,
Right. Pay attention. And this
right,
is why it's important to have a certified financial planner, because when you meet with your certified financial planner, you say, hey, I think I'm moving to Brookings, which is, in the banana belt in Oregon. And there is a banana belt there. It's beautiful. Moving there, moving out of California has a tax consequence when it comes to your investment portfolio that you really should be mindful of. So I'll let you keep going, Christina.
no, that's right. And if we have a client that moves from California to Texas, not a big deal. Like California is a really huge municipal bond market. They're typically high quality and sought after by other state residents, and even federally, nationally, there's an attraction because there's a big marketplace for California bonds, whereas there's a very small marketplace for maybe Kansas bonds or Missouri bonds. But so if you're going to a tax-free state, not as big of a concern. You can still own California bonds if you're a resident of Texas or Tennessee or Washington. So it's not a huge concern, but it's something we do have to be mindful of. And if we take a look at the next slide, what this really means is this is a coupon of 4.4. Other way, sorry.
Yep.
There we go. There we go. So 4.45 is the coupon that we saw on average coupon interest rates that we're going to get from those tax-free bonds. Now we're going to look at the scenario of this particular case study. If the client has if they're in 32% federal tax bracket, 9.3%, which many clients are in California, easily in the 9.3% state tax bracket, if not higher. And then you have the 3.8% net investment income tax. Your total tax rate, you're looking at 45.1. So then we take a look at what that really translates to. And with a 4.5 coupon on this next slide, that yield tax-free. So we're looking at 4.52 is the tax-free. Whoops, sorry. Here we go. 4.52 tax-free. If we look at the taxable equivalent, what you would have to earn on a portfolio and then go pay the tax, what would you keep? So you'd have to earn 8.2%, then pay the tax, and then you keep 4.52. So 4.52 might sound, hey, well, I can go get 5.3% right now on a 1-year CD. Well, if you're in this tax bracket, you're going to be a whole lot better. Unless it's 8.2, you're not keeping all of that after taxes. So 4.52 on a tax-free, state tax-free, federally tax-free is really a higher rate of return with fairly low risk. If you were to try to get 8.2, you might have to invest in a stock portfolio where you can own bonds and have a lot less risk depending on the type of bond you're purchasing at 4.52 and keep that amount of income.
It reminds me, Christina, my wife and I went to Italy about this time last year, and we sat down and we just had, the food is just awesome in Tuscany. You sit down and you might have a lunch and it's 20 euros. Well, it costs you 20 euros, right? If you go to the United States and lunch is 20, good luck finding a $20 lunch anymore. It's like $30 because there's tax and tip and all this other stuff. So it's kind of in a similar vein, is you really need to think in after-tax terms. Because if you go out and you have a CD that generates a 5% return, you might be giving up, 2.5% in tax. So you're really left with 2.5 or 3 or 2.5 or 3%. So it's really important to pay attention to the after tax, what you're putting in your pocket. And I will say, for those who have purchased tax-free bonds, those people tend to keep buying them, right? Yeah. Once they discover them, they're like, wow, this is really good, right?
Yep. And those are things that we can do to put, specific features on them, where if we're going to buy the bond, we're going to lock in that income. We're going to put some call protection that makes sure that that municipality can't, redeem or refinance that bond for the next 5-6 years. We want to make sure we've got some protection features that if we're going to buy this bond, we want to make sure we're going to have this income source for a longer period of time, which we're doing a lot of in this environment because, interest rates aren't coming down anytime soon. Right. But when they eventually do come down a bit, we want to try to lock in this higher rate environment and have that income stream that's going to continue to pay us for the next, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, while a bond or, a CD or money market might go down in, 2 years. We want to make sure we're locking in this interest rate market for a longer period of time and not just chasing the current yield of the day.
Yeah, Christina, can you briefly talk about, like, if I want to invest in tax-free bonds, you don't just, if you want to invest in Apple, you buy Apple stock. You just go and buy it. It's publicly traded. There's all these shares of common stock. And where I'm going with this is these tax-free bonds are issued by all these different types of political subdivisions, and they all have different credit ratings. So it's just not like I'm buying a California tax-free bond. There's a whole bunch of different considerations. So like, how do you go about buying these? So I pick up the phone, I call you, I say, Christina, I'd like to invest $100,000 in tax-free bonds. What do you do after that? Where do you go to find these bonds?
And we're using institutional traders. So we're using traders that have an expertise. And I've gone through traders in our career. We've gone through several, but we've got traders that know our criteria, that know what type of insurance we're looking for. Does this bond have any blemishes on it? Does that agency have any dings on their record? So we're really understanding the criteria of each bond. And then our traders that we're going through, they're buying 50 million of these in blocks at a time. Yeah. And then we're able to get at a wholesale price. So we're not buying them retail and then, having to mark them up to our clients. So
yeah, and that's how that market works, is that you go to the bond desk and they have a big block of, they're not going to pay attention to an individual investor who wants to invest $1 million. They're going to say, get lost, right? They're just not worth their time. So, all right.
So broker CDs, I'll touch on this. This is a hot topic in this current interest rate market. So one of the things that we saw for years, and we're unfortunately starting to see this again. One of the common mistakes that people make is they start spreading their money out over all these different banks. And then they're doing it for FDIC coverage. They're doing it for yield, or say, well, I can put 50,000 over here at this bank today and 200,000 over here at this bank because they're paying 0.3% more. And then what you end up having is you have people that have accounts all over the place. They may not be titled in their trust. If anyone's ever had to do trust administration, every single bank requires their own trustee, successor trustee documents, their own power of attorney documents to be executed. And it becomes a nightmare when you have money all over these different accounts that are at different banks. And especially in this type of environment, you're chasing that extra 0.3%, extra 0.2%. Well, what we can do for our clients is hold in one account in your trust. We can say, okay, well, we have the list of all the CDs that are out there in the marketplace. And if you were to walk into Bank of America today, they're not going to offer you a Morgan Stanley bond. They're not going to offer you a Goldman Sachs bond. They're going to offer you, or a CD rather, they're going to offer you their CDs. That's it. So if they're the best today, you're opening an account there. If, Wells Fargo down the street or your credit union here is the best tomorrow, you're opening an account there. And then all of a sudden you're chasing all these different accounts for yield. What we do is we can actually open up to the entire marketplace and go, okay, we want a 6-month, we want a 12-month, we want an 18-month. This is our, 2 to 3 year bucket of money. We're going to structure these different CDs and we can hold them in one account. So we can hold a Morgan, a Goldman, a Bank of America, a HSBC, a Barclays. We can hold all these different CDs in one account. And then you can have the FDIC insurance spread out across different banks and institutions, but you're holding everything in one trust account. So it's easy for trust administration and you're getting the access to the best of the best in the marketplace. And we do get them wholesale. So, that's one of the things that if you're really looking at CDs, let us help you versus trying to go out there and open all these different accounts.
Yeah, I mean, if someone has a couple $1 million and they say, yeah, I want it in CDs, it's a heavy lift. It's a lot of activity to have to kind of pay attention to everything. And then you might miss it and that CD re-ups and it may not be the best interest rate. So I think this makes sense for a lot of people.
Yep. And then direct ownership versus passive ownership. So real estate, we're working on several clients right now that, they're too real estate heavy entering retirement. They are not analyzing their cash flow on their net returns on the real estate. And so the pros of having directly owned real estate is you have complete control. You may have a higher cap rate depending on when you purchase the property, how much debt you have on the property, what your annual overhead cost is, and what your tenant rent rates have been? Have you been keeping up with the market rates? You may have more control to have a potentially higher cap rate. And cap rates on passive owned real estate right now are getting back into the low 4s, up to 5. So depending on what type of real estate you're looking for, we are seeing that rate come back up. And you have flexibility. You can sell it whenever you want to, assuming you have a buyer. So all real estate is illiquid. You can't just sell it tomorrow and turn that into cash flow. So unless you have a traded REIT. But the cons of owning direct real estate is you have additional capital expenditures. Homeowners insurance policies are going up like 10% a year right now in California. You might have to put in new new roof. You might have to put in new appliances. You might have lost rent. You might have squatters. You might have you might have a rent control areas. You might have tenant issues. And if people don't have a huge bucket or surplus of capital to handle all of those costs, real estate is not a poor man's business. Owning real estate is something you have to have a huge amount of reserve to maintain that real estate and really understand what your true rate of return is after property management, after mortgage, after property taxes, after insurance. What is your real rate of return? And if it's not above 4%, it's worth revisiting, should you really reposition this in your portfolio?
Yeah, Christina, you're raising a lot of issues on the con side, frankly, that are that affect a lot of our clients. Many of our clients are older, not all, but if you're in your 30s and you start buying residential real estate that has a 27.5-year depreciation window, well, when you're in your 60s or maybe 70, approaching 70, your depreciation's gone. Like that, the tax benefit for owning real estate, that's over. You've got, to your point, if you've owned these properties, now I'm assuming, you could do maybe a 1031, but let's say you've held these properties for 30 years. Those properties are 30 years older than when you bought them. And to your point, you're going to have to redo the kitchen. And, let's face it, a kitchen that was done in the 70s, if you want to rent it today, you're probably going to have to redo it, right? No one wants to have that kitchen from the 70s. So I see this with a lot of clients as they get older and they see they're pouring a lot of money into the rentals and it's kind of, they're weighed down by it. The other issue too is when one spouse passes away in a community property state, and California is a community property state, you get a full adjusted cost basis on things that are included in your estate as a general rule. Meaning, if a couple, maybe they bought a bunch of properties years and years ago, when one spouse dies, the surviving spouse, the one who's alive, can sell that property typically free of capital gains tax. And that's when a lot of people end up selling, because they say, look, first of all, you get more basis. You might want to hold on to it, right? Potentially, but you still have those same issues of maintenance and rehabbing the property. So what we're seeing, a lot of clients come into us, and if this is you, please reach out to us or Christina. But if you say, gee, I don't necessarily want to wait till one of us dies. We want to sell it now. You can do a 1031 exchange. That's Internal Revenue Code section 1031. And Christina will talk about some alternatives to owning the property individually.
Yep. So when we talk about calculating your capitalization rate, we're working on a couple client proposals this morning, and they're net negative every year, net negative on. So our recommendation is to sell the real estate. And we got to do so in a tax efficient manner, but understanding, okay, your total income after all of your expenses, divide that into the current market value, and there's your cap rate. So, $20,000 a year, people might go, oh, that $20,000 a year, that's going to pay my, my income gap of what my discretionary budget is. That's great. I'm going to have an income source in retirement. If it's a 2.7% rate of return, that's not a really good rate of return. Yeah. When there's other sources out there. So been kind of looking at, should we do a 1031 exchange? You can do a 1031 exchange, which we've done webinars on this before. We'll probably do another one next year because it's been a little while since we've done one. You can do a 1031 exchange and defer that capital gain tax into another piece of property that you own outright or own directly, or you can go into a passive structure like a Delaware statutory trust, which it is illiquid. It's only for the right type of investors. You have to be accredited, but you can defer that capital gain into a portfolio of real estate where you're just collecting the income stream every single month and deferring the capital gain until they sell that property. And then when they sell that property, you're participating in the potential appreciation of that property, and you can then choose to pay the capital gain or continue to defer it until there's been death of a spouse or something along those lines. So you can go into a passive structure, which again, those are paying between low fours, sometimes as much as 5%, depending on what type of portfolio we're going into at today's day.
Yeah, and Christina, this is a really good really good option to consider for somebody who says, if I sell this real estate, I'm going to get hit with big taxes, right? And I don't want to own this real estate anymore, or I can't own it. Now, sometimes people inherit property. You know, I did say when people pass away, you get an adjusted cost basis. We've covered this in other webinars. If you've got assets in a B trust, a bypass trust, maybe mom or dad died a long time ago and there was a surviving spouse, and now that those B trust assets are distributed, the beneficiaries of people who inherit the property may not be getting a step up in basis. So might have 3 kids owning a property together, and they don't want to own the property together. But if they sell it, they have to pay taxes. This can be a really good alternative to split the sheets. Everyone goes their separate way, and you're not having to deal with your siblings on a piece of property going forward. So again, Christina, you did a very good job with this. This is not, and it's not for everyone, but for some people it is very attractive, and a lot of people do this. Otherwise, frankly, this industry would not exist if people weren't doing it. So we see this a lot with our clients, frankly. Yeah.
Exactly. And then simple dividends, just a dividend stock portfolio. And dividend stocks, what we're showing here, dividend paying stocks typically have less volatility. This is showing since 1973. If we were to look at the equal weight of the S&P index, and that shows a standard deviation there in the bottom of 17.76, which standard deviation is just your measure of risk, how much ups and downs. It just shows that 68% of the time you're going to fall 17% above or below the average return of 7.68%. And if we look at dividend growers and dividend payers, you can see that typically those returns are higher with a little bit less volatility. And beta is just the correlation. A beta of 1 is a complete correlation to the index of the market. A lower beta means lower correlation. A higher beta means more volatile than the market. So what I wanted to highlight here is that typically dividend paying stocks end up performing better in the long run with lower volatility. But then if we look at this next slide, they also pay a higher dividend than an S&P index, for example. Like the index isn't going to necessarily distribute as much returns as owning those actual blue chip names. So if you're looking at if we look at the Dow Jones here at the bottom, this is as of the beginning of this week. Dow Jones US Select Dividend Paying Index is averaging currently 4.4% dividend yield. So those dividend type of stocks are going to be household names like AT&T Utilities, AT&T, Verizon, Exxon, Home Depot, Johnson & Johnson, Procter & Gamble, Kimberly-Clark, Clorox. These are things that, I'm not recommending any one of these particular stocks. I'm just saying that those types of stocks pay a dividend in addition to getting some long-term potential growth out of that stock. And so rather than just having all of your juice in, a growth stock like a Google or, even an Apple or Microsoft pay small dividends, they're not as high of dividends, and you would have to maybe sell some of those shares to generate your income needs. Whereas you might be able to own a basket of dividend paying stocks where you're not having to sell your underlying seed corn, you're just collecting the income that's coming in off of that portfolio at a higher rate than a growth stock. So dividend stocks play a huge role in our clients' portfolios when we're talking about retirement income. And then interval funds. These are types of different asset classes. It could be private, 90% of the capital markets, the real capital companies out there are not publicly traded. They're privately held, and there's a way to invest in them through private equity or interval funds. That could be private credit, could be private airports, private toll roads, could be real estate. There's other types of ways to invest in these sectors to where they might only offer quarterly liquidity. They might only be trading like that after 12 months of illiquidity periods of time. So there's all different rules and regs, but sometimes you're getting 8-9% in interval funds, and they have a higher ability to pay those income because they're not traded emotionally every day. So if you were to watch CNBC and see the sky is falling on a particular sector, you might go, I'm just going to sell it. And these sectors don't have as much volatility because they're not traded every single day. It removes some of the emotion, and they are typically able to pay a higher rate. So if you're willing to give up some of that illiquidity, you might be able to generate a higher income yield in some of these types of asset classes. So interval funds also play a role. There is typically a little bit less daily pricing. Real estate investment trust, again, this could be private, it could be public. There's different types of these. It could be self-storage, it could be healthcare, it could be data centers, it could be hotels, it could be multifamily, but there are ways to own an investment in real estate, and they typically have some tax benefits that go with that, as well as if you were to get a 6% dividend or interest yield on a REIT, not all of that is taxable because you still get the benefits of owning real estate, depreciation, mortgage interest deduction, those things. So owning a real estate investment trust could be another way to source an income stream in retirement.
Yeah, it is a way to invest in real estate without owning real estate. So it is a real estate investment trust. It's a trust structure. 90% of the income must be distributed every year. So they have some special rules, and that's where the acronym comes from. The T in REIT is trust, but it's a trust with a lot of people participating in it. And again, these are publicly traded and private. Yeah.
And then as we kind of wrapped up the income strategies, I know we can open it up to questions before we kind of talk about some of the next upcoming webinars that you're going to be doing, Jim.
Well, we have next week 5 top strategies to avoid death taxes. So a lot of people are thinking about this because in 2026, the amount you can leave tax-free gets cut in half. Right now is about 13 million per person. That's going to get cut in half and adjusted for inflation. We're anticipating right up 7 million. And many of our clients have more than 7 million. And if you think you might die with more than 7 million, you should probably watch this because the death tax rate is going up to 45% on amounts over 7 million. So if you have a $17 million estate in 2026, it's a $4.5 million death tax bill. So it's not a small amount of money. And for many people, that is a big shocker. So we're going to be covering the 5 top strategies to avoid death taxes. If you are watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can click the little bell and you will be alerted when we post new content. And we will now open it up for questions. But if you are watching this on YouTube, just keep watching because another video will magically scroll. Thank you for joining us, Christina. It will just keep watching. Don't go away.